Hello everybody, welcome back to Home Defense Shakedown. My name's Todd, I'm the owner. I fielded a ton of questions since my FRT, my force reset trigger video came out. I thought, I'm going to take, I don't know, the top 5 or 6 and I do a little short video. Of course, my videos run long all the time. And it's a little windy out here, so I apologize for that if you get a little mic pop. So I'm just going to get right into it. I'm just going to start reading off the first, and this is by far the most popular question that I got, and it is, why have rapid fire? So envision for a moment, you're asleep in bed with your wife, your kids are asleep in their bedrooms, and unmistakably you hear somebody breaking into your home. And you grab your self-defense weapon and you're off to take care of that situation because you have a plan. That's what we do when we come out. We kind of help you develop that plan. And in the process of carrying out that plan, you are now confronted with an armed person or persons, multiple, and you're now in fear for yourself, you're in fear for your family, and you have to engage those people because you have no other choice. Are you going to want to have the tactical advantage? You're now in a gunfight. It's your life that's at stake. It's your family's life at stake. Do you want to have the tactical advantage in that situation? Well, of course you do. Now, I've had a couple of clients in person when I've been out their home conducting training saying, well, I think a handgun is sufficient, Todd. I got a 9mm handgun. I carry it with me every day. I'm super comfortable with it. I can shoot relatively accurate with it. Why would I need anything more than that? And first off, I always say, hey, look, if you're comfortable with that, then stick with that. But give serious consideration to an AR rifle platform in something a little bit more pop than 9mm. Just think about that. It doesn't have to have an FRT in it, a forced reset trigger. Just think about a rifle, because again, we're talking about a tactical advantage. If those bad guys, plural, if they're armed and you feel, again, that their intentions are to kill you or harm your family, that is not the time. You're in a gunfight. That is not the time to all of a sudden, my gosh, these guys have a rifle with an FRT. They're firing rapid fire at you, and you're sitting there with your handgun going, well, I don't know exactly how I'm going to handle this. This turned bad really fast. You don't have options. Am I saying that if you had a rifle with a forced reset trigger that you're going to flip it to forced reset every time you engage, God forbid, someone in your home that's armed? Of course I'm not saying that. That's going to be up to you. That's going to be up to your training, what you feel confident doing. That's not me to tell you that. You have to, whatever you do, you have to be comfortable with it, because you're going to be accountable for that later. But in my personal opinion, to hamstring you, cripple you with not having that option is just plain stupid. You're in a gunfight. You're fighting for your life. I think in that case, having the option of a forced reset trigger, that rapid fire option, is something I'm not willing to sacrifice. It's that important to me. So that's my take on it. Of course, you might have a different take. You think it might be, I don't know how it can be, if you're fighting for your life or you're trying to protect your family, be overkill. What does that even mean? You're not trying to kill anybody. You're just trying to stop them as quickly as possible. Well, force reset trigger will do that pretty damn quick. So there's my take on that. Second most popular, and by the way, that was the most popular by a ton. These others, again, big response, but not quite as much. Over penetration. How do you avoid it? There's a lot of frangible ammunition out there. There's a lot of hollow point ammunition out there. That's going to be something that you're going to have to experiment with. Do a lot of research on YouTube. There's a bunch of guys that do excellent jobs kind of talking about over-penetration, if it's even a problem. You'll be surprised. Most of the findings are that even just like 55 grain training ammo, ball training ammo in 5.56 223 doesn't penetrate as much as you think. But again, there are other options. Stuff, hollow points, again, expand upon impact. Frangible, literally explode on impact. They'll hit whatever it is, and they'll just kind of just bust into a billion different fragments, which I'm sure if you hit somebody with that, a bad guy who you didn't have any choice but put it into them, I'm sure the doctors are going to have a nightmare trying to get that fixed. I've seen some of the gel shooting, gel videos, and it's like, oh my God, it's just almost just like shrapnel when it hits. So there are options. You just have to kind of look in and just figure out what's best for you and your situation. If you live in a stick house, and I mentioned this in another video, then I mean, obviously there's things that can go through that wall. I live in a block house. I'm not so concerned about it. All right, and again, we're just kind of working my way down here, and this is really no particular order at this point. Some of my clients apparently have associates or friends or something in law enforcement, and of course this came up, and law enforcement's like, oh my gosh, you know, the people at least they were talking to, not all, they were talking about force reset triggers and the use for home defense and stuff, and they were telling me, expressing to me, they were getting some pushback. It was like, you know, a guy that I trust, you know, I've known him for years, we're friends, he works with the police department, and he just doesn't understand why anybody would think that a rapid fire to that degree would be necessary. Well, I would remind those guys that their special unit, you know, whether you call it SAU or SWAT, those rifles are equipped with full auto. Now, they do not use that setting, just like you won't use the FRT setting all the time for every situation, but it's an option for those guys. If it's an option, and I preach this, if law enforcement or the military feel that they have an option for a particular feature or piece of equipment, then you know what? You and I, we owe it to ourselves to look into that and see if that's something we can adapt into our home defense strategy. So that's my take on that. What ammo should I avoid? I'm not sure. I mean, I got this a couple of different ways, but there really isn't any. I mean, if you're talking caliber, I mean, I wouldn't go crazy big. You know, I think 5.56 223 is fantastic. I personally love 300 blackout. That's kind of my choice because I'm going to be firing suppressed inside my home, and the wind just kicked up, so hopefully it's not too bad. It's quiet, so if I have to, God forbid, engage somebody in my home, that, you know, I'm not going to have the percussion of my weapon firing inside of a very small enclosed space to deal with, because that's going to affect me too in my judgment, and I really want to avoid that. So that's my personal choice, but of course there's a lot of choices out there. 6.5 Grindle, well, it comes into AR platform now. There's so many different choices. You're just going to have to figure out, one, economically what you can afford. There's some ammo that's cheaper to practice with, and that's really important to practice, of course. So if you buy like an exotic ammunition and you're using it, but you can't afford to train because the ammunition is so expensive, that kind of defeats the purpose. So I would just kind of do some research and figure out what's right for you. But gosh, I don't think there really is. I would use even 308 in my home. I mentioned that too. And I mentioned that to clients. I have a couple of AR platform 308s, and that's an awesome round. I mean, that's a stopper. So if somebody's trying to assault my family, or, you know, assault me or kill me, pop them with that and it's over very quick. But there are some disadvantages to that too. You're just going to have to look into that. Let's go to the next one here. Do they fit on all AR lowers? And this is of course in regards to the force reset trigger. If it's military spec, the odds are is that you're not going to have any problem. It's a little trigger where it's just slip it in and put the pins in, and it's pretty much good to go. There isn't anything to put together like a jigsaw puzzle, like in a normal trigger system. You just slide it in, take the old one out, put the new one in, put the pins in. I have personally never had a military spec AR lower not accept a force reset trigger package, but I mean, it could happen if you buy a really affordable AR, which is nothing wrong with it. Sometimes their tolerances aren't quite as exact because they're just kind of cranking them out as cheap as they can. So you might have issues. Most likely you won't. Here we go. This one I was kind of put a smile on my face when I got it. Aren't you afraid the ATF might take them as they did before? Long story, plenty of guys doing videos on that whole fiasco with the FRT triggers. They basically, in a nutshell, it didn't fit what they wanted it to fit so that they could take them away from us. So they created something in order to take them away from us. And then it went through the court system, and the courts decided, no, they're full of shit. They don't fall under what you think they are, what they fall, machine gun. And so now they're back open and available for purchase. That's why if you're even thinking about buying an FRT, buy one. We need millions of them in use, so it's common use. I preach, and I have no control over it, but a lot of these guys on YouTube that have huge audiences, I always say in the comment section, just tell your viewers to just look into it and purchase ones, because the more we have on the street and people are actually using them, then it's going to be that much more difficult for them to play those games again a second time around. But no, I'm not afraid of it. If you don't exercise your liberties, you'll lose them. So if you're afraid of buying one, thinking, oh, I'm going to drop $500 for a FRT trigger, and then they change the rules again, and it's really shitty, but I don't agree with it, but if they want it, I don't want to go to prison, and then you're just afraid of that, so you never initiate a purchase. You're basically creating the problem that allowed them to do that. If we all have them, if there's millions of them out there being used by law-abiding citizens, they're going to have a much more difficult time. Could they still try? Of course, the anti-gunners, the big government people are going to be, we don't like them. Because I don't care if it's constitutional. I don't care if citizens should be able to legally own them. We're just going to do what we did before, throw a little wrench in the works, and create an issue where we can pull them. I don't fear that at all. If you don't exercise your liberties, you'll lose them. Let's see. How does an FRT work? I got this a few times. People just didn't understand how the whole function of the weapon was changed when you put one in. The easiest way for me to explain it is every time you pull the trigger on any weapon, you have basically, you squeeze it to the rear and the gun goes off, and then you release the trigger and allows it to reset, and then you can squeeze it again. So bang, reset, bang. So you're doing two processes with your noggin. You're thinking, squeeze the trigger, get that beautiful shot. Don't mess with the weapon when you're doing it. That whole be smooth, not fast. And then you have to physically remember to release the trigger and then squeeze it again to get it to go off again. The force reset trigger basically cuts your workload in half. So you're pulling back, but the FRT is saying, Todd, this weapon needs to be reset, and it's resetting it for me. So it's still semi-auto. And then it just allows me to focus on bringing the trigger back in a nice steady pressure versus having to do the whole, this number as much. You're still doing it because the trigger has to move forward to reset, but it's doing it for you. That's why you get that rapid fire effect. You're cutting the workload in half, making it twice as fast. And then my last one. I don't live in Arizona. Are FRTs legal in my state? I have absolutely no clue. There are a lot of states, I would say over 50% of the states don't restrict anything about FRTs, and I would say there's probably less than 50% that do. If you live in, say, communist California, Oregon, Washington, I'm almost guarantee they have something on the books that's unconstitutional, not allowing you to purchase them. But that's something that you're going to have to look into. You really don't look on YouTube. You're going to have to just go to your whatever you have in your state where you can access the rules, the laws, and just do your own research. or ask somebody like a local gun shop that keeps up on that shit. Then, they should be able to provide you an answer. But just don't think, well, this guy in Arizona who really just focuses on Arizona because that's where my business is, he kind of was talking this thing up. I'm pretty, excited about it. Maybe I'll just drive from California to Arizona and buy an FRT and then drive back to California. That's on you. I'm not going to say that's a bad thing, but you probably are going to be violating the law. So you're going to have to be okay with the potential consequences of breaking the law. A bullshit law, but it's still a law. And, it can put you in a bind. So there's the questions. Hopefully I made this, geez, I still rattled on over 10 minutes. If you are local in Arizona, I welcome you to give me a jingle. If you call me, I have a very small crew. A lot of times I'm busy doing stuff, so you're going to get voicemail, but leave a voicemail, as a lot of my clients will attest to. I get back to you relatively quick. Or, of course, you can go to the website, homedefenseshakedown.com, and you can send me an email. And a lot of times in the evenings when I'm kind of gathering my stuff and figuring out how to close out the day, I return those emails at that point. I will get back to you, even if it takes me a day or two. I will get back to you. So there you go. Thank you again for tuning in. Hopefully it was a little bit helpful. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do so if you think this kind of stuff is interesting. I don't put out a ton of videos, so I won't be a wash in your stream on YouTube. But when I do put one out, it'll give you a little notification. Thank you again, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.